So there's so much I can talk about. Just in response to your question, the president has issued a number of executive orders that provide federal agencies the directive to actually act on issues of historical inequity, historical racism, etc. Let me get really specific about a couple of those different orders. So on day one of the administration, the president issued Executive Order 13985, which was the order on racial justice and equity. And so in that order, the president said, I want every single federal agency to actually evaluate how its programs are reaching underserved and underrepresented folks. Footnote, because I'm a lawyer and we got to draw a footnote. So the footnote here is that we have a Supreme Court that has been, I can't, you all know what I'm talking about. Yeah. So even coming into this administration, we had case law in the books that made it difficult to explicitly call out race. So much of the language related to race is really framed in this underrepresented, underserved, overburdened language, which every single map that you look at, quote unquote disadvantage, has Black and brown communities in it. So we're talking about health disparities, Black and brown communities. We're talking about exposure to environmental toxins. We're talking about Black communities, Latinx communities, right? So there has been a lot of discussion around, well, why can't we say race? And it's not lost on anyone in the administration that Black communities, that communities of color, have faced disproportionate burdens. We are limited. We don't want to expose our actions to further litigation because we already know they're coming from us. We don't want to expose our actions to litigation by leading with race. Okay. So that said, the president issued a number of orders really aiming to get at these historical inequities. So 13985 was one. The second one was Executive Order 14008, which was the landmark climate order tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. And in that order, Section 223, he names an historic Justice 40 initiative. So Justice 40, as I mentioned before, is the unprecedented and historic promise that 40% of the benefits of our spending on climate and clean energy are going to go to frontline communities, to disadvantaged communities. So that's the architecture. There's more architecture. There's also a landmark and historic environmental justice order, which is 14096. That was signed in April. These are the sort of the bricks, the infrastructure, the architecture that allows us to do our justice work, but we need to keep going. So when I look to my left and I look to my right in the administration, I see people who are doing the work on the ground before they join the administration. And we have the brain power in the building, in the administration that can really activate this work. Now, many of us had to figure out where the bathrooms work, right? So it's taken a while to kind of get this train moving. We have strong leadership in the Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, HUD, HHS. We have departments where we have these experts in racial justice and environmental justice that are in place. But specifically, so with this architecture, these executive orders, at the Department of Energy, we have really been literal in understanding, look, our department operates in a system that was never designed for equity. It was never designed for racial justice. So we explicitly acknowledge that as we begin to do our work. Now imagine telling hundreds of scientists and engineers that what they've been doing for the last 50 years is actually leading to inequality and inequity. So it took a little rewiring. It took a little bit of education to actually talk about issues of equity and justice in my building in particular. We didn't have a racial justice initiative. But now again, as I mentioned, everything we're doing is centering underserved, centering under-resourced, centering folks that have been left behind in the past. And so we have a couple of very specific things that we're doing, and then I know other people need to talk and I want to hear from others. So one, for the first time ever, every single applicant for Department of Energy funding has to put together a community benefits plan. This was historic. So in the past, folks pay lip service to the community. They sort of talk about partnerships, get letters of support from EJ organizations. But now 20% of their application is rated based on the merits of their community benefits plan. And in that community benefits plan, they have to say how they're going to do stakeholder engagement. Now imagine these large companies that have been applying for DOE funding for the last 20, 30 years. They're like, how do I do stakeholder engagement? I need help. We need funding to learn how to do it. I'm like, no. You don't need more funding from us so you can do your stakeholder engagement. You need to create a plan. So if you need to hire external consultants to get your capacity built, do that. But we're not going to support you to do that. Second, they have to show how they're actually going to deliver benefits, job creation, reducing energy burden, partnering with businesses. They have to show that by census tract and in detail. We've never had to do that before. They also have to show how they're going to partner with HBCUs, with minority-serving institutions, specifically and in detail. And then fourth, how they're going to create a workforce that looks like America, as well as create jobs that actually are giving folks a pathway to economic prosperity. So we have built that. That's a new requirement. We know that folks at the White House are looking at that. We know that folks around the federal government are also looking at that. The devil will be in how this all plays out. But we at the Department of Energy alone have $100 billion. $100 billion. And every single dollar that is applied for now has to have this community benefits plan attached to it. So that's one concrete way that we're using this architecture, this infrastructure, to actually deliver on justice warnings, to deliver on the promises of racial justice by this administration. The second kind of concrete thing we're doing is we're on the road. So see my family over here. And we were in Port Arthur a couple weeks ago for our Energy Justice to the People roadshow. We were in the Rio Grande Valley a couple months ago, going to communities where there has been a legacy of oil and gas infrastructure. We were in Lake Charles as well a couple weeks ago. So we are actually getting out of our offices, and I'm taking colleagues into communities whose minds are blown. All the battles I've had to fight for the last year, they now get it. Why are you fighting for this justice worthy? Why are you fighting for job creation? Why are you fighting for businesses? Well, let's go to the communities that have been left behind, where wealth is being created hand over fist by industry, and none of that wealth is actually making it to any communities. Let's go down there. And then you can help. It's been transformative, and that is really the legacy of my tenure in the department. And many of those folks will be left when I leave. They're going to continue to fight the fight. So those are the ways we're doing this at the Department of Energy.
That was powerful. And I also want to add a part that you left out also that I want to uplift is listening to community. Oh my God. So I think about even before my appointed role, being in those long calls, making public comment, and feeling like it was absolutely going on deaf ears. What I can attest to is that for the first time ever, we can go back to 2020 on the campaign trail of this current administration. It was the first time in history that on a stage you even heard the words environmental justice. The first time. And it seems minuscule, but it's not, right? So when you mentioned Director Baker, like taking your colleagues to actually see, for far too long in a lot of our agencies, not just even at the federal level, at the state and even local, people don't even see these communities that far too often are screaming at the top of their lungs about the conditions in which they're living in. So I think that that's powerful that this agency that has not historically been diverse, and you know what that means, to be able to see physically firsthand these communities that have historically been underserved. So I definitely want to pinpoint that, and I will even say it's almost a sigh of relief. We still hold our breath a little bit, you know, but at least like being seen, visible, and heard, that really matters. So thank you for sharing that, Director Baker. And directing this question to our other panelists, Kiara, Heather, and Elise, can you describe specific experiences or observations where you've worked in community organizing and respective aspects of your work, where you directly challenge white supremacy, call it what it is, and environmental racism, where sometimes it's not as cute. You know, a lot of our work, especially folks, you know, that work sometimes in some places, like where me and Heather are from, okay, and at least I'm from Tennessee, my God. We got Alabama, we got Mississippi. That doesn't necessarily work the same way. And some of the other states that sometimes we engage in. So can you talk about some of what those struggles have been, but some triumphs, some strategies that you have used to go against the grain, against white supremacy and environmental racism? And we'll start on the far end with Kiara, then Heather, and Elise.